Okay, good afternoon, good evening, in fact, one and all. And thank you so much for coming this evening to the public meeting that I've convened on the District General Hospital, DGH in particular, around our paediatric services and our midwifery services. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh Babarindi. I'm the parliamentary spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats in Eastbourne, but I'm an Eastbourne boy, born and bred. I was born in our DGH. I've been treated in our paediatrics department as a child, so these causes mean a lot to me in particular, and I know mean a lot to all of you too, which is why you're here. Now, there have been a number of proposals that have come to light and been released in recent months that have outlined a number of changes to the paediatrics department and many would have seen what's been happening with our midwifery unit, which is currently, on checking the news last time, closed for births in Eastbourne. Now, the information that's been out there about some of these things has been quite limited, and I feel that it's really important that folks know, not least because we all pay our taxes for those services and rely on them, folks know what is going on locally. I'm also going to share some of the concerns that I've had and that many others across town have had, whether they're residents, whether they're patients, whether they are clinicians. But the most important reason that we're here today is because I want to make sure that you, as residents in this room, get to have a say. I have asked for a pause to the changes that I'll go through in a minute, and for a full public consultation to take place, because I think that that's right. And East Sussex NHS Hospitals Trust, they're the folks who run the DGH and the Conquest, have declined to offer that pause and that consultation. So my response has been, if you won't consult with the public, then I will, and this space is a forum for just that. So I'm going to ask my colleague Ben to move us on to the next slide, and this will be the agenda for the session. So I'll give an update on paediatrics. I will then give a much shorter update on midwifery, because the paediatric one is especially long, and then I will invite folks from the room to offer their views. And then at the end we'll close, which should be around 7:30, but I'm sure there's lots that folks might want to say in the room, so we may go on a bit longer. So Ben, if we could go to the next slide. So paediatrics, I will start there. So let me outline what things look like at the moment in terms of paediatric care. That's care for children across the hospital trust. The two key hubs. So we have Eastbourne District General Hospital. We have the SSPAU, that's a short stay paediatric assessment unit. In that unit, a number of things are done, for example, planned investigations. So these may be things like blood tests, allergy tests, all sorts of things to help ascertain what might be going on with a child to make sure that the right treatment and care can be provided afterwards. You've then got outpatients, so that's where a child might need to come in for care that doesn't require an overnight stay. And then, of course, we've got our emergency department, A&E, where children can receive urgent care as well. Over at the Conquest, we have an inpatient paediatric ward, so if a child needs to stay overnight, that's where they go, the Kipling ward. They have a short stay paediatric assessment unit as well, a special care baby unit, and then outpatients as well. Now in 2020, the CQC, Care Quality Commission, kind of like the Ofsted for Health and Social Care Services, rated these services as good. Next slide, please, Ben. In terms of some stats, there are plenty out there, and I've put in a number of freedom of information requests to try to get more, which haven't yet come back because the deadline's not passed. But in 2022-2023, 13,500 children presented to the emergency department. From there, 341 were transferred to the short-stay paediatric assessment unit, but there are other pathways and other destinations, if you like, from which children are referred into the system. Next slide. So that's where things have been. Let me tell you a little bit about the proposal that the East Sussex hospital bosses had for our paediatric services. So again, quite extensive, but I've boiled them down into three core facets. So the first is around creating an emergency floor. So you have in the DGH a few different areas where children can receive care, and actually they are physically quite distant from one another. And one of the things that the hospital bosses want to do is basically to move them all into the same place on the DGH site. My view is actually that's a great idea. There are a number of reasons for that, but it can be, you get a much better standard of care if things are consolidated in that kind of way. You reduce infection risk if you consolidate things in that kind of way. So in my view, good. It's not all bad. But another element of the proposal, and this is one that I have a key concern with, which we'll discuss later, is replacing the on-site paediatric consultant at the DGH with an advanced paediatric nurse practitioner. Advanced paediatric nurse practitioners are highly qualified clinicians and should absolutely be respected. However, they are not paediatric consultants. And I'll talk a little bit about that more later. And then the third element in the plan was to remove the hormone testing from the short-stay paediatric assessment unit to the Conquest. Now that is no longer part of the plan. I'll explain the timeline in a minute, but that was part of the original plan, and for me, a cause for concern. That would have directly resulted in children and their families having to go over to Conquest. Next slide. So these are the rationale for the changes, and these are taken directly, word for word, from what the Hospital Trust has said. And I should say that, this meeting was called at short notice, so the Hospital Trust I've asked if they could provide with some information that they wanted to distribute. They provided me with a link that outlines the changes in their words, which I will send to all attendees after this meeting. And if there are further resources they want to share, I will distribute those to you as well. But here is what they've said are the rationale for the paediatrics changes. So first, they don't feel that the existing location is fit for purpose, and this comes down to the whole the point I raised around consolidating all of the services within the site in one place. Secondly, they feel that there will be a better skills match with the needs of patients and the staff that are on offer. Thirdly, what they're hinting at here is that in the current short stay unit there is a staffing shortage, and so they're having to spend a fair bit of cash on locum staff to help fill the gap. Fourthly, what they're hinting at here is that it's not efficient to have highly qualified consultants there all the time, well not all the time, but for the time they're there now, when they're not needed for every single case or patient who comes before them. And then finally, I've mentioned this point already, that you can reduce the infection control risk by keeping movement of patients across the hospital to a minimum. So those are the key rationale that they've described. Let me go into what are some of the key challenges, in my view and in the view of many others, including clinicians, residents, patients. So first of all, there still remains a risk of children who currently receive care at the Eastbourne DGH having to go to the Conquest to get that care. That is not acceptable, in my view. And here is what the Trust said, word for word, at a meeting of HOSC. This is the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which oversees proposals and changes to health services. And what Trust representative said is, we are substituting a consultant for an advanced nurse practitioner. It might be the case that the advanced nurse practitioner takes a more cautious approach and therefore sends more children over to Hastings than a senior consultant would. In my view, that is not acceptable, and in my view, at the very least, that constitutes a substantial change, a substantial variation to the service, and should trigger a full process of consultation. Next slide. So you also have an issue then with the proximity between a patient, a child patient who needs care, and a consultant who has the relevant qualifications and experience to offer that care. Here is what a Trust representative said at that same meeting when the committee, a cross-party committee, questioned them about it. The representative said, at the moment we have a consultant on site 9 till 7, Monday to Friday, and that will not be the case going forward with this new model. There will be a consultant available doing other clinical activity and an advanced nurse practitioner physically present, available at the end of a phone, and to attend the hospital for emergencies. To attend the hospital for emergencies by travelling from Hastings to Eastbourne. In my view, being at the end of a phone is not a sufficient amount of care that can be provided, but my view on this doesn't matter so much. This is the view of clinicians who have reached out to me who are concerned about these particular plans. We need those consultants at the end of the corridor, not at the end of a phone and not at the end of a road. Next slide. So some of you may have seen just before Christmas an ITV Meridian News feature on this, and there is one consultant paediatrician who went on record to describe his concerns about these changes, and I want to show you that video so that you can get a flavour of what some of the experts are saying about this. So you can see there then that these concerns are not just held by politicians, as well as being held by patients and members of the community, and you're here representing many of those. They're also held by folks who have spent years and years and years providing this paediatric care that we know that children in Eastbourne need, and that children in Eastbourne deserve to be able to get in our town, in the town where they live, not next door. Another issue is around staffing. So they have spoken about the advanced paediatric nurse practitioners replacing the capacity left by consultants. However, what we understand, based on folks who have reached out to me from the hospital, and again at that health committee meeting, is that number one, a number of staff in the unit have moved on, and another challenge is that the advanced nurse practitioners that are required, they're not all there. They're not all ready and waiting. And one of the additional things that creates concern for me and for them is that these changes came in from Monday. It's happening over a period, but Monday is when it kicked off. Another challenge is around the facilities. So you remember I said that I thought it was a good idea, the prospect of moving things around within the DGH, that you have the emergency floor, all of that stuff happening in one place. In order to make that happen, the hospital trust said that what was necessary was a kind of prefab modular unit to be bolted on to the hospital. Fine, those are the facilities that were commissioned, and those are the facilities that should be able to make that happen. This was meant to be in place and delivered in December, ahead of the changes coming in January. That unit still hasn't arrived, yet they have proceeded to continue with the changes. And they've said at the meeting, absolutely, it was meant to be in December, that should have been open before we got to this point. We would have preferred to have had that unit there at the start of this. I think that's an understatement. That's a key reason as well why myself and many across our community were calling for a pause until you've at least got the equipment and facilities in place that you say you need. Instead, they proceeded to carry on. So I'll give you a bit of a timeline about how this has unfolded, again to give more context. But I just wanted to ask at this point, before coming this evening, or before you've heard this alarm raised on the news by myself and by others, can you raise your hand if you were aware of the extent of what was going on at our hospital? 1, 2, 3, 4 folks in a room of 100, 150 people. Extraordinary. Okay, so the timeline in terms of what I've been able to see of this and the information that I've been privy to is that in July 2023 this decision was approved by the ESH, that's East Sussex NHS Hospitals Trust Board. It was approved then. On the 8th of September I first became aware of the concerns, well, the proposals, full stop, and the concerns that folks had about this. Immediately, I wrote to the CEO of the Hospital Trust and aired these concerns. That there were 3 key things that I aired in that meeting. The first is that what's going to happen to the quality of care and access to care, things that the consultant who you saw on there raised. The second issue I raised is, why has there not been an open process, including a public consultation and a chance for all of us to feed in? And the third thing I raised was around the bravery of those clinicians who work within the NHS, who work within the DGH, who have spoken out about this. Some privately in my inbox and others, some publicly, like the consultant who you saw there. And so I sought assurances from the Hospital Trust that those who whistleblow and share concerns will be protected and not punished. And while we're here, I would love to honour those folks who have raised this, without whom this meeting probably wouldn't be happening. So can we give them our brave NHS? So those are the concerns raised in that meeting, and followed up shortly afterwards. Then there was a bit of a break while more meetings happened and information was gathered. But I requested again a pause and a full consultation on this matter before us. And this was the response that I received from the Hospital Trust. We are committed to listening and have had many sessions with our staff, and we continue to be in dialogue with the team. These service developments do not require a public consultation, and these are an internal service move. And as we've already stated, this is about moving services into different locations on the DGH site and expanding the paediatric input into the front end of the hospital. In short, it was a no. Next slide. On the 13th of December, I launched a petition, again calling for a pause and again calling for a full consultation. And within a matter of days or weeks, 2,500 people across our town signed that petition. And I think is what has brought many of you folks here. On the 20th of December. This came shortly after the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, where councillors on a cross-party basis reiterated that call for a pause and asked for a review of the situation. The response to that was the Trust declined again to pause, declined again to consult, and confirmed the plan. The plan being that the emergency floor model would proceed, despite the fact that the prefab unit hadn't yet arrived. Confirmed the plan to remove the on-site paediatric consultant and replace with advanced nurse practitioner resource. They confirmed, though, that they were keeping that hormone testing that I mentioned earlier at the DGH. They found a way to keep it within outpatients rather than have to move it over to Conquest, which was a real win thanks to the pressure that folks were putting on. And thirdly, what the Trust confirmed is that rather than the move to this new system on the 8th of January being a kind of cliff edge and going straight from old to new, that there would be a transition and that they would operate a shadow short-stay paediatric assessment unit while they're still trying to get this new model right. So as it currently stands, the removal and replacement of those paediatric consultants from the Eastbourne site hasn't yet happened. So there's still time, in my view, for a pause and for a full consultation. On the 7th of January, which is on Sunday, aware that things were still progressing, aware that we needed to escalate this, I publicly called on the Secretary of State for Health, Victoria Atkins, to intervene. We need backup. Next slide. The implementation started to begin on Monday, and then the 10th of January, today, a public meeting where you'll get the chance to share your view, which I will take directly to the Hospital Trust and to the Health Secretary, and I have written to the Health Secretary to reiterate the earlier call I made for her to intervene and use her forthcoming powers to call this in so that it can be reviewed, hopefully paused, a consultation, and these issues thrashed out. And you'll see on your chairs that letter that I have written. Next slide. So that's paediatrics. A lot there. And as I said, for that reason, I'm not going to delve too much into midwifery, not least though because the midwifery situation speaks for itself much more. Folks will be aware of the history of our maternity services in Eastbourne. We lost consultant-led maternity, despite the best efforts of great campaigners like Liz Walk and the Say the DGH campaign. But that meant that we still have a midwifery unit, a midwife-led maternity service at the DGH that was facilitating some births at the hospital and also home births and other tests and things at the DGH. However, throughout the last number of years, but particularly last year, what we saw and what mums-to-be experienced was periodic suspensions of births at the DGH. And we are currently in the midst of one now that began just before Christmas. Originally it was going to be just for a few days. The Hospital Trust then said that it's going to be until the end of January, at which point there will be a review. And we don't know what it will look like beyond then. So during that period, no babies born in the DGH, which is extraordinary. And as well as that, over the weekend just gone, we saw home births suspended. So that meant literally there was no way of safely having a baby in Eastbourne. Instead, it meant needing to go to Hastings or elsewhere in order to have a baby. We're one of the fastest growing towns in the area. We should have a thriving maternity department, a fastest shrinking hospital, with services being salami sliced or rejigged to Hastings year after year after year, and it can't go on. So that's the bulk of my talking, but I hope that you found that to be useful in understanding a little bit more about the situation. But as I said, I will circulate the information that the Hospital Trust have provided, that link, so that you'll be able to see, not just in my words, but in theirs, how they describe these services changing. So what I'm going to do is kick off the section around sharing views with something that Val, an Eastbourne resident, she's lived in Hampton Park for decades, has had to say about both paediatrics and our midwifery services. She used to work at the DGH herself, so has that additional insight.
Sorry I can't be with you today. I'll explain later in my video. I've been a resident in Hampton Park for over 40 years, using maternity services, which in my experience was excellent. My youngest was well known to the paediatric department, as he spent most of his life in what was the Friston ward. Thank goodness I didn't need to go to the Conquest. I couldn't afford the journey, and also I had other children, plus no grandparents to help babysit, so it would have been most inconvenient or virtually impossible to take my youngest one and all the others with me to the Conquest, plus I didn't drive at the time. The reason why I'm unable to attend, I will explain later. Are the Conquest geared up for the extra staff, space, equipment and parking spaces, as there are new immense housing projects being built in and around the area of the Conquest, like Bexhill, Setherscombe, Hastings, Orr and Rye, to name but a few more east of Eastbourne. How do they propose to cater and care for our own expanding areas? New housing estates being built along the Eastbourne Road, Hazelwood Avenue, Stones Cross, Halsham, Horham, Seaford and many, many more. The Conquest will not be able to cope with the influx of patients from both sites. There just isn't enough room and infrastructure to go under one hospital. They are struggling at the moment with the Conquest. What proof have they got that it will be completely viable? It's got to be somebody playing with figures, without feet on the ground, at different times of the day or night and days, especially during the summer season when we've got visitors as well. Knowing what's really needed and being paid huge salaries to something that's not really viable to close the DGH. Also, the road between the DGH and the Conquest is shut every night from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The variations of road closures from the Marsh Road to Bexhill due to repairs which are being carried out along the road in various different parts each time. It's been going on from early December through to around February. That's not meant to say if the weather is bad then it gets extended. So if there's an emergency, like maternity, for example, paediatrics, cardiac department seems to be moved over there, orthopaedics and general surgery have also been shunted over, which is not fair. That is to add a few different specialities. It will add a lot of time to the journey, plus possible tragic consequences. It can't be a viable solution to make the DGH a cottage hospital. What happened to the new hospital we were promised? Possibly the excuse will be all the work that's been done, giving it a new look is the new promised hospital. That's not good enough. Which it seems to be going that way. With the town and surrounding areas are growing at a vast speed, we need explanations, and for any other planned closures that they've got secretly, or they think secretly, up their sleeves. I don't trust them, do you? I would love to come this evening, but I'm babysitting due to my just over 3-week-old grandson is having a minor operation at the Conquest today. They have waited almost 2 weeks for this operation to go ahead due to staff shortages. It's an example that there will be no different from there to here at getting anything done, and they live in Hastings. In fact, it will be worse, and this was labelled urgent, as he can't feed properly and he's lost 8% of his body weight already. So I'm sorry, but I won't be back in time due to my son and daughter-in-law returning home with baby and the road closures. Good luck, everyone.
Lots there from Val, and again, some of the same themes coming up as came up when we were talking about paediatrics, but in terms of the maternity or the midwifery unit, the reason given for the closure now, temporary closure now, and the closure series that has taken place in times gone by has been staffing shortages, notwithstanding the amazing efforts and hard work and commitment that our midwives demonstrate day in, day out. These shortages are what are plaguing so much of our NHS. So we've heard from Val sharing her views. I'd like to invite members who are gathered here to share their reflections, whether it's stories about your experiences at the DGH, paediatrics, maternity, or indeed in another department, what it might mean for you, these plans here, and what your general thoughts are. These are what are going to be captured and passed over to the Health Secretary to make sure she's clear why it is so important that she intervenes and calls this decision in. So if you'd like to speak, do raise your hand and I will work my way around the room. I will start over here, roving mic. So please do say your name and introduce yourself in any other way that you feel before sharing to the room.
Thank you. My name's Helen Diplock. I apologise, I've got emotional listening to that because it's reminded me of some of the amazing, absolutely fantastic care that my daughter has received, and also sadly some of the suboptimal care that has happened as a result of recent changes. So just to introduce myself, I'm mother to 2 girls, the second of which was, do I need to move away from the mic?
Feel free to come and stand in the middle if it's easier.
Thanks Josh. So I've got 2 wonderful daughters, the second of which, would it be better if I did? I'm not a big public speaker, so apologies. That's no better. Is that better? Yeah. So anyway, so as I was saying, I've got 2 wonderful daughters. My second daughter was born in 2016 with Down syndrome and various medical issues, so quite complex medical needs. The first couple of years we were in and out of hospital. She was born in hospital, we stayed in hospital, we came home, we went back to hospital, we lived in hospital, various hospitals. And that was the pattern for the first couple of years of her life and continues to be to a lesser extent now. I think the information that the local NHS Trust has given Josh and us is disingenuous. When Rosie was born and when we first started going in and out of hospital, the provision of care at Eastbourne was fantastic. Monday to Friday there was 12-hour care, 8 till 8, as far as I remember. That was consultant, junior doctors, nurses. The whole team knew us, they knew Rosie. We had open access, Rosie still has open access, so that's for children who are medically complex. We can pop in as and when needed. We go straight to the children's unit. They know her medical history, they know what her normal baseline is, and the care we received was fantastic. Rosie at that time was solely reliant on an NG tube for feeding. She had constant regular breathing challenges, so we were regularly going in for breathing problems. We didn't have to go through A&E because we had this open access, we had straight access in, which meant that she wasn't vulnerable and open to sitting in a waiting room, which is what we've had to do recently. Since COVID, this care has been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. So what the Trust has presented as the status quo and a small shift actually is quite a significant shift from where we were in 2016 and 2017. And it's incredibly upsetting to me that it's been presented that way, because I think the staff that were and have been in Eastbourne providing exceptional care have been misled in terms of what care they've provided. We've had impacts over the last couple of years. There was a time when we took Rosie to A&E a year or so ago, and there was no paediatrician available. We had to wait in general A&E with everyone else. Rosie was extremely unwell. Her oxygen levels were very low. We had to wait with everyone else. There was no oxygen for her until she had been through and been seen by triage, and then we saw a lovely paediatric nurse who was fantastic, knew Rosie, knew me, knew what needed to be done. We were seen by a junior doctor who had never done a paediatric rotation. He did not know what the normal numbers should be on a child Rosie's age. He got it wrong. In the end, the nurse stepped in and we were blue lit over to Hastings. That was before this recent change. In the summer, Rosie had another period where she was very unwell, knowing that there wasn't the support at the local hospital and she needed to be seen urgently. I took her to the GP at 8 AM, who were fantastic. The GP could not get hold of a consultant at either Hastings or Eastbourne. They did, however, phone ahead to A&E. We went to A&E, we queued with everyone else at 10 o'clock. A consultant was available. We were then, immediately she was cannulated, she was put on some oxygen, she was given IV fluids, etc., antibiotics. We then had to get a taxi from Eastbourne to Hastings because the ambulance was too long. It wasn't safe for me to drive her with her breathing. So we had to get a taxi, which I find unbelievable. But anyway, we then had amazing care. We spent 24, 36 hours in hospital. We were discharged. 2 nights later, Rosie deteriorated about 9 PM. I had to drive her in the night, in the dark, to Hastings to be seen, to be assessed, which is just ludicrous. For a town of this size, it's absolutely ludicrous. And just to be clear, I will not take Rosie to DGH A&E going forward, because there is no one who can meet her complex medical needs. I will take her straight to Brighton, to the Royal Alex, or straight to Conquest. That means if Rosie is unwell, we either call an ambulance, or I have to drive her over an hour. I'm fortunate that I can now drive. I couldn't when Rosie was first born. One of the things that I find particularly distressing is that the impact falls on those that are most vulnerable in our society. It falls on children who don't have their own voice. It falls on medically fragile children who already have the odds stacked against them. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. It also falls on the poor, on those that are socially isolated. In my day job, I work as a debt coach. I help the very poorest in our society. I had a client call me from Hastings in tears. She had gone to the GP with her baby who had breathing problems. The GP had sent her to Hastings because it was the daytime and that was where the consultants were. She had a son in year 6 at primary school. She has no family nearby. She was worried, how am I going to get my son home from school? I'm in Hastings. I don't have the money, she said to me, to get from Hastings to Eastbourne. So she didn't have the money because she'd been taken over in an ambulance. She didn't have the money to get over. She didn't have a way of picking up her child. If her child had been in Eastbourne DGH, she could have nipped across town, left him in the care of the nurses for an hour. And this has happened to us multiple times when Rosie was little, where I would have to take her big sister with us to hospital. But it was 20 minutes down the road, not an hour or 2 hours if you're doing it by public transport. I'm greatly upset frustrated, disappointed, saddened that there hasn't been a proper consultation on this. When there were changes recently around the walk-in centre, that was a big issue. When there were changes recently about the heart services moving to Conquest, that was a significant issue. This has not been consulted on. I'm a member of the East Sussex Parent Carer Forum Steering Group, who are an official body. We have not been consulted on until we have asked to be consulted on upon this. So this is very, for me, this is not a minor change, this is a significant change, and we should be consulted on, not on the basis of where we were in December versus January, but where we were pre-COVID and where we are today, but actually what the needs of our town is. What are the needs of the children in Eastbourne and the families in Eastbourne? What should we be providing? And the fact that they can't get the staff, that's a sad indictment, I think, of the culture. Let's improve the culture, let's improve the reputation of our hospital, and let's bring it back, bring back the children's services we need. I'm just going to end on a quote. So another family with a child with medically complex needs with Down syndrome sent their apologies because they couldn't be here. And she said, if everything we went through with her son when he was born happened now and we had to go to Hastings, I'm certain he wouldn't have survived. And I think I can echo that for our Rosie. This is the reality for those of us with medically vulnerable children. An Eastbourne without specialist paediatric care is sadly a death waiting to happen.
Thank you so much, Helen, for sharing that with the room, and I really hope that when we present this to the Hospital Trust and to the Secretary of State for Health, that every single word of what you've described is listened to and taken forward, so we get that consultation that we deserve. Not just because it's the right thing to tick a box, but because our needs matter, your needs matter, Rosie's needs matter. And as well as that, we've got ideas, insights and intelligence into what the actual issues are that can genuinely help to make the proposals better. Who else had their hands up? I'm going to move around the room. I'm going to come over to you.
Hello, my name's Veronica Townsend. I'm actually quite new to Eastbourne. We only moved here in July, and it's almost a sense of deja vu. We've had exactly the same issues with our local hospital, our town hospital in Lincolnshire, where I come from. My daughter is expecting a baby in early February. She has mental health issues which have made her her pregnancy quite difficult for her. She really wants to give birth at Eastbourne Midwifery Unit. She's been seen by a wonderful midwife there through her pregnancy, but the stress and concern about having to travel all the way to Conquest is actually making her mental health worse. She really needs to have a certainty about where she's going. She's scared stiff of her partner having to drive her to Conquest in February in the dark with road closures and all that sort of thing in the poor weather. She realises that even if she's able to go to Eastbourne, she may have to be blue lighted over, but at least if she was blue lighted over, she would have the certainty of being able to get there safely with a midwife with her, whereas if she was had to be driven over by a partner, she would be absolutely scared stiff. She's actually asked me to be her second birthing partner because of her anxiety and depression and concerns. So I really feel that this is something that needs urgently addressing. Eastbourne is much bigger than the town that I came from, but as I say, we had all the same issues. And I was expecting to actually come down here and find that, that things were better, but obviously they're not. So anything I can do to support this campaign, I will do, because I feel that it's unfair and it's unjust that women in this area have to do this. And also just hearing today that actually home births have actually been stopped. Some of the friends that my daughter's made at antenatal class were hoping to give birth in Eastbourne. They actually, some of them have opted for home births in January, and to hear that that's actually not possible now as well is just devastating. So I'm just so pleased to see so many of you here today, and I just really hope that Josh and those of us who are really passionate about this issue will actually be able to make a difference in this town. Thank you.
Veronica, I should say on the home birth situation, they were suspended for the period that was last weekend. My understanding is that they have resumed again, but they're often yo-yoing on and off as well, just like the unit being open and closed for birth. So key thing, they have a really good Facebook page, the Eastbourne Midwifery unit, that they update very, very frequently with what's going on. So do check there. Hands again, please. I'm going to go to John Clark.
Thank you. My name is John Clark. 50 years ago this month, I started in general practice in Eastbourne. We used to do home deliveries at 9 Upton Road in the maternity unit. The trust stopped these because they stopped the flying squats, therefore it wasn't safe for us to continue doing it. In 2006, I and several others started the Save the DGH campaign group. And I'm sure some of you here joined several of the marches, which were very successful over the next few years. In 2012, Pim Sargent, then a consultant obstetrician, Stephen Lloyd, who was MP before Cameron Ansell, Liz Walk and myself had an appointment in Whitehall to discuss closure of maternity, and we had quite a long chat with Jeremy Hunt, and he agreed with everything we said, all the reasons that some have been stated, I could list many more, and so he felt quite confident. A week later we had a letter from him saying, "I'm sure the Trust knows best." And that was a politician for you, and with all respect, I have very little faith in party politicians. In 2006 it was a Labour government, in 2011 it was what was it called? A coalition, that's the word, yeah. And then it was a Conservative government. So we've had a go at all three, none of which have helped. In general practice, there are several, apart from maternity, we'll leave maternity for now, you've heard it all before. I did say on a couple of occasions that the domino effect would happen, and this is what is happening. But in general practice, there are a number of very serious emergency conditions for babies and children. For example, asthma, epiglottitis, epilepsy, and even, I'm afraid now, overdoses. And we just don't have time to wait for ambulances to take them to the conquest, even if there was enough time. And I'm sure my colleagues, there are 2 or 3 here, will all quote you cases of tragedies. So it is ridiculous. Once again, here we are fighting for what we should have by right, consultant-led services in Eastbourne. Now, a lady from Lincolnshire says that it happened to her hospital. Well, this is happening all over the country. And other hospitals, mainly in the northwest of England for some reason, have managed to solve the problems by putting more money into it and employing enough staff to do the job. So I don't think we want to start marching again, but I'm sure you've got other thoughts. We have to do something. This is a thin end of a very sticky wedge. We lost surgery, we lost orthopedics. I think we managed to keep most of cardiology actually from the Save the DGH campaign group amongst others. So please don't give up. There's enough people, I'm sure it'll help. Thank you.
John, a man who's got a lot of experience being on the front line of our health service, but also the front line of the campaign to protect it. And in terms of that point, we will do whatever it takes. We will shout however loud needs to be shouted in order to make our voice heard. Our key opportunity next is with the Health Secretary intervening around midwifery and paediatrics in Eastbourne. And if we don't get the result that we want, then you betcha we'll be out on the streets. I know many of you will be there too. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you. In fact, if you want to come to the front. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Serene. I'm a mum of 4, 2 much older birth children that were born at Eastbourne District General, where I had wonderful care, and 2 adopted children. And both adopted children have got significant needs. My youngest, in 2018, was very poorly, and I took her to DGH for these changes, where she was seen by nurses and junior doctors. I'm a physiotherapist by profession, and whilst we're wonderful, we're not consultants. Nurses are wonderful, they're not consultants either. Junior doctors are great, they're not consultants either. In fact, nurses I probably would trust more than the junior doctors. And my daughter was seen by a junior doctor and discharged home with a virus. And I took her back in the next day, convinced, mother's intuition, that there was something really quite wrong with her. And she was seen by another junior doctor and discharged with a virus. And I took her in the 3rd day, and she was discharged with a virus. And on the 4th day, I phoned, because it was really handy having over the phone, and I was told, just give her Diorolite, and she hadn't eaten for about 4 or 5 days now. Give her Diorolite and she'll be fine. At which point I phoned my GP friends to say, I'm not an overactionist mum at all. In fact, I'm usually the opposite, being a physio. And they are the ones that actually said, go in and demand to be seen by a consultant. We think your daughter's actually got meningitis. So I did, I went in, and I was that mother. And not only did Angel have meningitis, she had encephalitis as well. We were admitted, and we were there for the next 5 weeks, over in the Conquest, and I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of support from family and friends. So I was over at the Conquest for 5 weeks. My husband, the police were really great. They gave him the 5 weeks off so he could travel over every day. Financially, we can afford to do that, which is wonderful. But it was still quite difficult. By the 5th week, we'd kind of had enough there. And because we had the short-stay paediatric unit here, we were able to come home for the last 3 weeks and go in every day, and she could have her IV access medication. The care at Kipling Ward was amazing. I won't say anything about it, they were absolutely wonderful. But we live on King's Drive, absolutely opposite the DGH. And my other daughter, who has separation anxiety and attachment disorder, she really struggled through that 5 weeks without having mum there. And so her schooling suffered. And we always get into trouble when our children don't go to school like they should do. But they never take into account these types of things. Since then, Angel has now got epilepsy, a learning disability, hearing impairment following the meningitis. She has fetal alcohol syndrome disorder and many other diagnoses, and we're at the hospital quite a lot. We are part of the endocrine bloods as well, so it was really nice to hear that they're going to actually stay there. It's really upsetting for Angel to have to go in, but she's got to know the nurses and the staff here at the DGH, so it's not so awful for her. But the thought to have to go over to Conquest all the time, take her out of her special needs school where she feels safe, and therefore her attendance is going to drop, and I'll probably get another letter from the local authority to say my child hasn't been in school enough, is devastating really. Aside from us, I work with East Sussex Parent Care Forum a few hours a week, because as a parent of a child with complex needs, I found it impossible to continue with my physio career and ended up having to give up that career, which I value dearly. And so as parents with children with special needs often can't work full-time or in the jobs that they were doing, you do have a financial implication. and yet those are the ones that will actually be implicated when they're actually going over to Conquest, as you've already heard from Helen. With my East Sussex Parent Carer Forum hat on, we go out and we talk to parents and we listen to their voices. And we have problems in so many areas, health being one, having carers assessments being another, not having help, financial, or just another person there to actually help us, because we're 24/7 often. So this is just another nail in the coffin for all the difficulties that we might actually face. For the staff, when they talk about staffing issues, as somebody who has actually worked in the NHS here, when you make life quite difficult with the working environment, so you've reduced from a very nice working environment that we used to have at Friston into a tiny poxy little place that you've now got as your sort of stay unit, staff are going to leave. If staff don't feel valued, staff are going to leave, and you're going to lose that expertise. When staff are told something that's going to happen and it's going to be fine and it's going to be better, then staff are obviously going to believe some of that. However, we've become far more cynical now that we've seen things change. I remember when they told us we were only going to merge management across Conquest and Eastbourne, and look where we are now. The Equalities of Impact Assessment, I wonder, was that really done taking into account children with disabilities? Have they actually looked at the Equalities Act? I wonder. I doubt it. Yeah, exactly. At the end of all of this, we've also got the family unit, where we've also got other children and the impact on those other children. Daily life with complex children means that siblings often aren't really in the forefront, and they have to suffer. Their friendship groups suffer, their education suffers. This is going to suffer once again when one parent is in one place, another one at home, or maybe it is just a single parent family. Then what do you do? At the end of all of this, there is a child, and Angel is 11. She's absolutely wonderful. She smiles from the time she wakes up in the morning, sometimes 4:30 in the morning, to the time she goes to bed. But that little girl is going to have some major obstacles in her life to come. Dan and I are not the youngest of parents, having adopted her when we were in our mid-40s. And we worry about her, we worry about all aspects. The thing that we didn't think we'd have to worry about for her was healthcare. Not in the UK, and not when we live opposite a pretty decent hospital.
Incredible, thank you. I've got a hand right here. Do you want to come to the front in there, Barry? What do you have?
Hi, my name's India, and I came down here tonight with my 2.5-month-old daughter, so apologies if her noises disturbed anyone. We've been very, very lucky hearing some of the stories tonight. I feel we've had amazing care, and I really can't complain about the care that we did receive at Eastbourne and at Hastings, but I wanted to share my views because I've just encountered both of these issues, and it would have been quite different if the paediatric unit hadn't been open for us. So I gave birth at Hastings 2.5 months ago. I had wanted to give birth at Eastbourne, and I'd done a lot of research, having just moved here from Istanbul, about my kind of options in the NHS. If you look online, it says you have a choice of a home birth, a birth in a midwifery unit, or a hospital birth, and that all parents should be given the option to pick one of these two things. I really wanted to give birth at the midwifery unit. It was my first child. But it was in October, and the unit was open and closed, open and closed. I was looking at the Facebook page every day, thinking, okay, I can't go into labour for the next 26 hours, hopefully after that I'll open again. It's very stressful, as one of the other parents here said. And at the time I went into labour, the Facebook page was no longer updating because the closures were happening so frequently, so I was told, just call when you go into labour and we'll tell you if we're open or not. So I called up at 2:30 in the morning and I was told, we're closing at 6:30, so if you've had the baby by then, that's fine, if not you'll have to go to Hastings. I went in at 5:30 and the lovely midwife said, you know, I wasn't quite in active labour enough yet to be sent to Hastings in an ambulance. She did say if I wanted to go in an ambulance she would call one, but I have my mother and my husband who wouldn't have been able to go with me. So we took a taxi to Hastings at 6 in the morning in a huge storm, water flying up either side. And by the time we got there, I was pretty much ready to give birth. I was there for 3 hours before the baby was born. So we made it with plenty of time, but it wasn't necessarily, didn't have to be the case. And we didn't have a car, so that was our option. And for lots of parents, going to labour, that will be the only option, is to take a taxi to Hastings and hope that you get the timing right. If you go too early, they'll send you home. If you go too late, you better hope you've got a very medically advanced taxi driver, I guess. So yeah, that was my experience. And then at Hastings, all the midwives were wonderful. The midwives at Eastbourne were wonderful with the aftercare. So the quality of the care that we received was amazing, but it was an extremely stressful experience, not knowing what my options would be on the night. And another mother in my antenatal group told me that she was in active labour at Eastbourne and was told that they were closing the unit because of staff shortages at Hastings, and she would need to get out of the birthing pool and get in an ambulance and go to Hastings. I had assumed that once you were at Eastbourne in labour, you wouldn't have to stop, but she refused to leave because she had already had a child and she could tell that the baby was coming. And she was told that the higher-ups had decreed that the unit had to close, and so there was no option. They were calling an ambulance and she would need to get in it. And luckily for her, the ambulance driver refused to take her because he said it's not safe. She's having the baby any minute now, and 20 minutes later the baby was born. So I think the danger factor of closing the unit at such short notice is surely higher than the risk of, having midwives split between 2 locations. So that, for us, giving birth in the last few months has been quite a stressful time. It looks like it's going to be quite stressful for people giving birth for the months to come. And then regarding the paediatric unit, I took my little girl in a month ago. She had a virus, but she had some blood in her stool. So I took her into A&E at about 8 at night, and we had the same situation. A paediatric nurse who was wonderful, she knew her stuff, she was great, but she wasn't able to decide if it was an emergency or not. She told us, she's probably fine, it's probably just a virus, but you'll need to see a doctor. The doctor on call was a junior doctor who wasn't a paediatrician. He told us, I don't really know if it's an emergency or not. These are the 3 life-threatening things it could be. This is the symptoms she would have if she had one of them. Do you think she's in pain? Do you think I don't know, she's my first daughter, I could tell she was unhappy. I didn't think she was in agony. So we waited while he tried to get hold of a consultant at Hastings, which took 2.5 hours. And eventually it got to about 12:30, and I said to the nurse, she's not in agony. The conditions he mentioned, it sounds like by this point, if we were still waiting, they would have progressed. Is it safe to take her home? And she said, yes, take her home and come in tomorrow and speak to a consultant. So we were able to do that, but had the consultant unit not been open, as it now isn't, we would have had to take her to Hastings, and without a car, that's either 2 hours each way with a sick baby, newborn, or that's a £90 taxi each way. And, as it happened, it was a virus, and she's now better, and I feel very lucky. But yeah, it's really going to impact, I think, anybody with a young child in Eastbourne who, is in a position where they're worried about their kid and just wants some reassurance quickly and safely.
There are so many stories, we're running out of time. I can see it's a hand up over there, I think it's Nick. I'll come round. Please may you pass the mic down.
Thank you, Josh, and firstly, a big thanks from everyone here to you for bringing this to our attention, a critically important issue in our community. I think we have to recognise first that this is 2 issues, a national issue and a local one. Nationally, there's been managed decline of our health service over a period of time. We've got a lack of investment in facilities, a dispirited and under-rewarded healthcare staff, a lack of training of the new doctors, nurses and allied healthcare professionals who are going to be the new carers for our community. And these national issues have impacted upon our local provision and so many aspects of healthcare services. I've lived in Eastbourne for 38 years. 2 of my children were born in the DGH, in the late 80s and early 90s, when there were complete maternity and paediatric care available. 3 of my grandchildren were not born in the DGH, but at the Conquest, because of the reduced service provision. And I know so well of the traumatic episodes they went through and taking them and their partners to the Conquest in the middle of the night at that time. And to me, this is not progress in a civilised society. And this town and this country deserves better. And we must fight together for better provision for both. Thank you.
Enlist a new volunteer who's behind you. My mum. Mum, would you mind being a microphone? Thank you so much. Mum knows the maternity and paediatric unit pretty well. So we've got a hand over. Go ahead. And we'll take questions from seats so that we spend less time practicing.
Well, I must commend you and all your speakers so far for their very erudite explanation of what's been going on with them and their families. It's disgraceful. One question which I think has to be raised, and that's why I kept on putting my hand up, is why have we not had a local referendum on this matter, which would be binding, and the referendum would be on the following lines. We would like the directors and the chairman of the East Sussex NHS Trust to stand down, and we need to have proper doctors and nurses running the show, because they know what's going on. And I would like that referendum to be launched if we can. Perhaps you can tell me why it can't be.
Thank you for your view. Thank you for your view. I think there are steps we can take before we go nuclear in that way. But I think that, fundamentally we have this opportunity at the end of this month or start of next month for the Health Secretary to intervene to protect these services that are on the line at the moment. Let's get there and then let's map out where we might need to go after that.
Hi everybody, just thanks everyone for coming. I was really worried we weren't going to have many people, but thanks for arranging it as well on such short notice. So my name is Siobhan Brennan-Robson. I just want to start off by saying I think we need to stop calling our health service the NHS. It hasn't been the NHS for a very long time. The government and the media use this as a way to sort of, have this naive perception of, oh, but we must reserve it. It's Serco, it's Bupa, it's Nuffield Health, it's Virgin Care. It isn't the NHS, and the over erosion of our public services has defragmented the entire system. It hasn't happened overnight, sadly. It hasn't been the NHS for a long time. It's not a coincidence to me that Eastbourne the DGH is being targeted in this way. I honestly believe the reason why they're doing this is because they want to eventually just have one hospital, which will be the Conquest. It's sounding very similar to Cornwall. Cornwall only have one hospital. I don't know if many of you are aware of this. I was quite shocked when I found out about that recently because they're quite similar to us. They're a seaside resort, very desirable in the summer, and in peak season holiday periods we get a huge influx of tourism. But they're just taking away one service after another. Services here, I gave birth to twins about 10 months ago, but my care, maternity care and post-birth has not been good. And I just think women's healthcare in this county is massively concerning and extremely worrying. I have a couple of things to say in regards to the paediatric and the maternity closure. East Sussex Trust, let's just say it now, they are failing to safeguard our patients, they are failing to protect everybody. I'm not just talking about the children, I'm talking about, you don't just get the child, you get the parent, the carer, the foster carer, the adoptive parent. And the fact that this hasn't been consulted on is just despicable, to close a ward without even telling the public, the general public. I'm not going to be accepting this, and I will be complaining to East Sussex Healthcare Trust about this. Sorry, it's just really difficult to talk about this when actually the last year or so it's been very turbulent for us. My 2 children unfortunately were very sick last month and we had to go by ambulance. We had 3 wonderful paramedics. I honestly can say they were just phenomenal. We were very lucky to have got them actually, because I think if it hadn't been for them, I dread to think what would have happened next. But when we arrived at the Conquest, we were not wanted there. We were just told, oh, here's an antibiotic, go home. But my children had been sick for a number of weeks and they'd already had an antibiotic and that hadn't worked. That was the other point I wanted to make. Sorry if I'm toing and froing a bit. So they want to reduce services at Eastbourne, but our own GP surgeries can't even cope. We can't even get appointments. Now maybe it's just my GP surgery, but I don't think it is, because I speak to a lot of people and they have very similar issues where they phone up, there isn't a doctor. So on the day that my children had to go to the hospital by ambulance, by the way, I wasn't allowed to take them. I wanted to take them. They said, no, it's not safe. We have now got to take your children up. They said, we don't have a doctor in the GP surgery today, in December, in flu season. This is the reality. This is the reality. But there's other issues here at play as well, isn't there? Because the privatisation means that the funding for the GP surgeries isn't exactly going where it should be going. It's not being distributed properly. There's just, yeah, it's just so horrendous. I want to do more. I'll be honest, Josh, I don't think we should be pausing it. I think we should be going for it and saying, hell no, hands off our service. I'd love for us all to keep in touch somehow, if that, I'm sure someone's arranging that, but thank you very much.
Have we got any hands near the back?
Hi everyone, my name's Gabby. I'm speaking on behalf of my sister. She's a bit shy, so I'm just going to speak on behalf of her. Well, summer of 2022, my sister was really ill. My sister's got a tumour in her brain, hydrocephalus. It affects her really badly. She gets really bad headaches. She can't see, she gets dizzy. Like, this is an ongoing thing since she's been like 8 years old. So in the summer of 2022, she got really ill. She went to the hospital 3 times and the hospital didn't want to take her seriously at all. She wasn't seen by a specialist, she wasn't seen by anyone basically, until my mum took her back to the hospital. Mind you, my mum's a single mum and she had to go with Marcella, and me and my brother had to stay home by ourselves. So once she went, they saw that that she couldn't even handle the pain anymore, and it was too late for her, so they had to call a helicopter for her to get dropped off to London. In the helicopter, she had to get put to sleep because she stopped breathing. She almost went into cardiac arrest. I feel like if the hospital would have seen how ill she got those 3 days that she went in, I feel like this would have never happened, and I feel like she could have gone to London straight away instead of waiting this whole time. And obviously seeing her in pain was not... seeing her in pain was obviously not the greatest thing, and obviously seeing my mum as well stressed out because they weren't doing anything for her. They weren't listening to my mum, they weren't listening to her. It was just a struggle. Obviously she's been missing a lot of school because of it. I've been, I'm at college at the minute, and just when I see my sister in pain and I see they're not doing anything about it, it makes me really upset, and obviously I struggle with college and everything. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say, really. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mercedes. I've got 2 daughters. Both have had medical issues. My oldest had epilepsy, and it was about 7 years ago. She had her first seizure. We didn't know what was happening. We phoned for an ambulance. 2 turned up and a paramedic car, and she was blue lighted off to Hastings. I had to follow up in the car because my husband's disabled and can't drive. My car broke down halfway, so I was stranded in a town I didn't really know. And all I wanted to do was get to my daughter in Eastbourne. It would have been easier, so... obviously she's a lot better now, but like with the ongoing treatment, it would be 1 month in Hastings, the next month in Eastbourne, then we'd see someone else in Hastings, then in Eastbourne, and luckily I could drive, but my car was like 20 years old at the time, and we were a low-income family. I was trying to keep the car going because I was like, I can't not have the car, because if I have to go back to Hastings again, or I have to take her up there, or it's just an emergency situation. If it's in Eastbourne, I could have walked. She could have gone with Daddy again, and I could have just walked up. But it's just, why Eastbourne? Like, why take it away when there's so many kids? Why pick on the kids? Like, kids are innocent, and they haven't done anything wrong, and they shouldn't be taking away any health services from anyone but kids. And sorry, thank you.
I did see a hand over this side. No, there's a hand going. There's a hand. You in the red. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm an Eastbourne resident and actually grew up in France, so I've had the benefit of seeing how another country's healthcare system works, and it does pain me to see what we're currently putting our NHS through, or not us, but what is being done to the NHS, and as someone said, is it really the NHS anymore? But I'm also currently a first-year student nurse, and it has dawned on me that what I'm letting myself in for, because myself and my cohort of students this year, and the rest of the students at the University of Brighton, are being told and being taught that we're going into a battlefield, that we're going into an underfunded, understaffed, underappreciated system where we will be stressed. We need to learn how to manage our own well-being and our own mental health now, because it will be difficult for us when we're there, and to make the most of these 3 years, because actually once we are registered, we're going to be under fire. Well, it's no wonder that we are losing most of our registered nurses and qualified nurses to Australia and New Zealand and Canada, because not only have they got systems that are better funded, but the nurses are getting more recognised for their work. It's a better work environment, less hours, less stress, and more pay. I deeply love my country, and I am settled here with my 3 children, and I want to be able to work in the NHS and be proud of it. But seriously, have been starting to think, along with the weather that we have, is it better to look at working abroad? But then feeling really guilty about that. And I'm saddled with £30,000 worth of tuition fees by the end of it, and have taken out maintenance loans, because in order to concentrate on this degree course, I'm taking out extra help so that I don't have to work alongside it. By the end of it, I think I'll owe about £60,000. So then you're sort of thinking, well, I'm paying all this money, and then I've got to go into this system where you want to make a difference. When I was in my placement at the Conquest Hospital recently in December, I was on a surgical ward, and frequently we were understaffed. We didn't have enough healthcare assistants, so people who should have one-to-ones didn't have them, and there were safeguarding issues. People didn't get to have their breaks. You're working a 12.5-hour shift, and people hardly get to see their children and their family. So it's not appealing right now to work for the NHS. And I think the whole thing isn't it. We have local issues need addressing immediately, but on a national scale, something has to be done. It's not recognised as a worthwhile job to go into at the minute. Not attractive to people who are coming out of school.
Just add to yours, thank you, one, for your contribution, but two, for putting yourself in the firing line or out on the battlefield, as you referred to it as. I just wanted to say, an overwhelming feeling I had was around what you said about guilt, and your guilt for the prospect of leaving the NHS. And it's just got to be said that that guilt is not yours to bear or to stomach. That guilt needs to be borne by hospital bosses that are creating, someone mentioned it earlier, kind of hostile type environment, intentionally or not, that is pushing staff out. And that guilt needs to be borne by the government of any political colour for failing to invest in the NHS over a long, long period. That is not yours. It is other people who need to be held to account for that. And I hope that that's one key thing that comes out of this meeting today.
Hi there, I can echo that sentiment more. Just wanted to, there's been so many heartbreaking stories, and it's just really upsetting. But my eldest daughter was born in 2015, just after the Eastbourne lost its consultant-led midwifery maternity unit, and originally we were very happy to go to the DGH because the midwives there were fantastic, very welcome. We went to visit, and my wife was admitted with her waters broken. And she, everything was going okay, we thought. But after 24 hours, nothing had moved along. So she was blue lighted to Brighton to have a consultant-led maternity care over there. And after another 24 hours, she was diagnosed with preeclampsia and had an emergency cesarean, and my daughter was, it was emergency surgery. It's a horrendous experience, worst experience of my life, and when my daughter was born, she didn't breathe for the first few minutes of her life, and had she been at DGH, I don't know if she would have survived, because the consultants and doctors over in Brighton did an amazing job and revived her. We spent weeks in hospital after that because of the liver function of both my wife and my daughter. So that was our experience of labour, and it was horrendous. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But thankfully, had they had consultants in Eastbourne, it would have been fine. I don't know why in a town this size that isn't the case. We don't still have consultants. By coincidence, this morning my daughter, the same daughter, 8-year-old daughter now, she had a paediatric appointment at the DGH with a paediatric consultant. That appointment was cancelled 3 times before Christmas. It was for an ongoing chronic stomach pain that she has that they've still not got to the bottom of. But it was cancelled for three times before Christmas. Because of illness in the department, can't be helped. But obviously, it's already affecting services. The staffing levels aren't there for the current for the demand as it is. I can't see how taking away the consultants, replacing the nurses, is going to improve that or make it any different. I don't blame the DGH for having to change services around, because I know that they're not getting funding from the government. That's the bottom line. But they've done it without consultation. It's an absolute disgrace, and that needs to change. They need to consult. They need to listen to this forum, and everyone in Eastbourne, who I'm sure is equally angered by this decision without consultation. And just finally, I just want to say that I think it's great that you've called this meeting, Josh. I think it's an absolute bloody disgrace that Caroline Ansell is invisible and completely silent on the matter, and that it's her Conservative peers that haven't have made the decision to not fund the NHS properly. But she could stick her head above the parapet and call them out and say, you're not doing enough, you're not funding the service properly, it's not working. All these stories, and millions more across, echoed across the country, as the lady from Lincolnshire said, it's happening all over the country. They need to step up, fund the service. It used to be the crown jewel of this country. Everyone was proud of it. Everyone was, proud of this service. And over 13 years of Conservative government, it's been absolutely dismantled, disgracefully. And I think, they should all be bloody ashamed of themselves. That's where the guilt lies.
Emotional story sounded absolutely horrendous. And just to add as well, out of fairness, I did invite our MP to this meeting. She's in Parliament at the moment, so wasn't able to attend, but she has sent a representative in her place. Nicholas is just there. Nicholas, I don't know whether, would you like to say anything? I'm very happy to hand the mic over.
Hello everybody, my name is Nicholas. I am Caroline Ansell's office manager, and like Josh did say, Caroline was invited to this meeting, but as he also said, of course Parliament sits between Monday to Thursday. That is where she is, where she's representing Eastbourne, and I think what I really want to make clear, and I'm not just saying this because it pays the bills, but Caroline isn't invisible on this issue. She's met with the Secretary of State just yesterday. She's spoken with the Minister for Paediatrics, who is her colleague Maria Coalfield. Before this stage, she raised several questions about the proposals directly to the Trust, and also she's spoken to Mr. Brent as well, the consultant who was featured on that ITV piece just at the beginning, and also when it came to the HOSC meeting, she submitted a whole host of questions. She is challenging, she wants to get the assurance that I think all of us want to get, but just to say that all the really powerful personal testimony that we've heard here tonight, whether that's from Gabby about her sister, or if it's about from Serene about her daughter Angel, or Helen about Ruby, we've heard so many moving testimonies, and I haven't been on my phone because I've got more important things to do. This is my notepad, and I have been taking copious amounts of notes, because ultimately Caroline will be calling this in with the Secretary of State. All of this personal testimony gives that credibility when she is representing Eastbourne to the decision makers. So this is something, this is why I'm here, to make sure that she doesn't miss that. And of course I was a bit remiss because I didn't bring any contact cards, but please do send in your experiences. Caroline is very much wanting to make sure that that submission to the Secretary of State can be shaped very much through an Eastbourne lens. I didn't plan to speak, so I'm not sure if I'm moving into rambling territory, so I do apologise for that, but I think I'll probably stop there.
So I really appreciate that, so thank you, Nick. I would just like to point out that the journey time from Eastbourne to Westminster by train is about the same as Eastbourne to Hastings by train and by bus. And as a mother who's a carer who's had to do that journey, both journeys, when I used to work in Westminster, and as a parent carer doing it before I could drive, I would like to say bear that in mind, that she's very busy in Westminster, and I completely appreciate that. I had to pause my career because of the care of my child. I don't regret that, but that's had a significant impact on our family. But actually that journey to come back here to listen to constituents tonight, that's the same journey in a different direction that parent carers make to go and take their children to.
So I think we will begin to wrap up. I can see one more hand. I'll take one final hand, and then we will move on. Terry, can I ask?
Hi, sorry, I'll be really quick. So I'm a mum of two, and listening to everybody, I can really relate in many aspects. Something I think is quite important maybe to point out is that there's a lot of excuses all the time about funding in the NHS, yet just in Eastbourne we were able to fund the pier when it burnt down, being rebuilt, things that are aesthetic like the Beacon Shopping Centre, which flopped in my opinion, and lots of other things around the country which really don't mean much to people and that aren't very important and aren't really going to help the standard of living in any way or in any way at all. So I think it's quite important to sort of point out to people that are in charge of budgeting and stuff like that, who always talk about funding the NHS and not really having the money for it. I would really like to live without a shopping centre, without a pier, to know that my child is going to be safe when they need urgent care. So it's just about getting priorities straight, really.
Thanks for that, and absolutely priorities is the key word, especially when it comes to public funding. I don't want to get too political, but there are a number of items of funding in recent years that I think could have been better spent on things like the new hospital that we were promised and haven't seen much about yet, or preserving our paediatric or maternity services, or addressing issues when it comes to staff shortages within the NHS. Absolutely, but priorities are key.
Josh, where is our 3.5 million, which less than City Council owes?
I don't know what you're on about there, but we can talk about it afterwards, absolutely. So I'm going to start to bring the meeting to a close now. I just want to say a massive, massive thank you for folks making their contributions, sharing deeply personal stories that I know have been emotional for those sharing, but also very moving to those of us listening to. And I hope that the Health Secretary listens very intently to these words as well. So I know there are some people who might not have felt comfortable speaking out in front of the group, but still have views or experiences to share. And so you will see on your chair there are some forms, like the ones that Councillor Alan Shuttleworth is holding up there. And on there, there's space to include your contact details, as well as sharing in brief form your views. There are pens and things, I believe, around the room. If you haven't got a pen and need one, please note it down. These pieces of paper are what I am going to present to the Hospital Trust and to the Secretary of State, with a view to asking them, you're right, not just to pause, that's not enough, to stop these changes and to consult. So I really, really need you, in order for your voice to be heard, to note these things down on the paper. If you're in need of a pen, please raise your hand and we'll get one. We'll get one to you. Hands up, the pen's over there. And so what I'd ask is, once you've completed that, if you hand your form to a member of the team who are currently standing up on your way out. The 31st of January, that is that key date that we want the Health Secretary to call this in on. If you note your contact details, I will keep in touch again to the point that Siobhan made. This is a really important group, and I envisage that this won't be the first time that this group comes together. I think there'll be many, many more gatherings to ensure that we protect our health services in the way that we need to. But I just want to say, before I bring formal proceedings to a close, and you note down, thank you so much again. Let's put pressure on the Health Secretary, and let's protect our paediatrics and midwifery services. Thank you so much.